Hello and good evening. On my last video, we were discussing briefly our civic duties, what it means to have civic duties, what it means for us as inhabitants of the Americas or for any country for that matter. And what I wanted to discuss today is what led to us needing to be responsible for our civic duties. Today is January 6th. Okay. Um, there's a lot happening in the world today. Um, a lot of media, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of pressure, a lot of unknowns. Okay. A lot. So, why am I talking about civic duty now? Well, because we can't only fall into an emotional trap. We can't simply follow the emotions, be angry, be upset, be frustrated, fear, anger, frustration. Um, None of these will help us practically change our current situation. Okay. And I'm not trying to change the country, I'm trying to encourage us to use critical thinking, to use our history, and to use our civic duties that were given to us to start acting, even if it is on a community level, to hold officials accountable, to hold everyone who's operating our economy accountable to what they're doing, because ultimately we're working, we pay every time we do something here, we pay taxes on everything. We have the right to know. But that right isn't just mean that people will open up their books and let you know how they're handling business. The right to know comes with civic duty. What responsibility do I have as an individual within my community? Because if I can't do it for my community, I definitely can't start talking about a federal aspect of what is happening. Civic duty starts at home, it starts in our communities, and it's important. So, today, before we continue talking about civic duties, I want to touch on what I said we were going to discuss on my last call. It's been a while since my last call. A lot was happening. I needed some time to process. But I want to begin with the grievances of our forefathers, why the Constitution and the Bill of Rights exists. When you look at the creation of the Constitution, you realize that our forefathers were looking at not only what was happening in their present moment, but they really had this vision for the future, and they understood the risk of what they were creating, and they understood that there was a necessity for a level of protection and accountability, because they foresaw also what could happen when that is missing. But before we get there, how did they even get to the point of creating their own constitution? What grievances did they have at that time with the King of England that they needed to change everything and create something of theirs? Okay. And when I say change everything, we're talking about the Revolutionary War and separation from England. The grievances were that bad that the American people decided it was worth fighting for freedom. But what were those pressure points that the community, that at this point the 13 colonies were feeling at the time when they decided to build and create the Constitution? The core grievances against um, the British was against the centralized power. They were ruling by distant authority without getting meaningful consent from the people, meaning they saw all of the motions happening. No Nobody was asking for permission, nobody was giving consent. Things were just happening. Laws were imposed without representation, executive power operating without accountability, permanent military presence among civilians, military power placed above civil authority, arbitrary searches, seizures, and warrants, punishment without due process, control of the courts by the ruling authority, suppression of speech, press, and assembly, economic coercion and taxation without redress. That was the reason that they felt was so strong. Okay, let's look at these. I'll read them again. Rule by distant authority without meaningful consent. Generally speaking, we feel like we have lost touch with the decisions that are being made for the American people. The executive power operating without accountability. We see it every day. Permanent military presence among civilians, happening more and more every day. Military power placed above civil authority. Yes, the military is entering in places where civil authorities are saying no. Arbitrary searches, seizures, and warrants. Punishment without due process. Happens every day. Every day. Control of the courts by the ruling authority, meaning the courts are no longer operating by what is just and what is equitable. They are operating under a ruling authority that determines what that priority is for those courts. Suppression of speech, press, and assembly. We see that and have seen that over and over again. How sad is it when we hear someone speak with intelligence, with conscience? People say, oh, keep that person safe. Why do we say that? Because we understand when we hear somebody speak coherently, logically, critical thinker, pointing out facts, those people need to be protected. Why? Because there's truly not a freedom of speech. Economic coercion and taxation without redress. I mean, if we feel that the taxation system is working to the benefit of the American people, I'm not going to tell anyone what is, what isn't. Everyone can feel this for themselves. Okay. When our forefathers created the Constitution, they were attempting to prevent a concentration of power, permanent emergency governance, fear-based compliance, dependence that erodes sovereignty, and citizens conditioned to obedience instead of judgment. I'm going to say that again. Concentration of power. They were attempting to prevent, and they foresaw that this could happen. Concentration of power, permanent emergency governance, fear-based compliance, dependence that erodes sovereignty, and citizens conditioned to obedience instead of judgment. We live in fear. We live in fear. Our society has already been conditioned to understand that if you step out, there's a reason to fear, whether that's true or not. Permanent emergency governance. Since Abraham Lincoln, 1861, the United States has been operating under permanent emergency governance. You wonder why Congress doesn't act? It can't act. Permanent emergency governance supersedes Congress. Meaning, in 1861, when Abraham Lincoln said, hey, we need to make a decision. We do not have time to reunite Congress and have this decision. Decisions need to be made immediately, and he did. Established emergency powers. In those emergency powers, meaning the United States in 1861 was essentially from the Constitution, not even 100 years old. From 1776 to 1861, the first real crisis after the Revolutionary War, put pressure to understand whether or not our Constitution was going to hold up to what our forefathers were attempting to prevent. And yet, 1861, Civil War, immediately. Abraham Lincoln had sole power and authority under emergency powers to act on his own. And he did. From that moment on, Congress was reactive, not proactive. Congress had to come in after Abraham Lincoln made all his decisions, and then Congress went in. And under pressure, because at that point he'd already acted, they either had to determine whether they consented to what he was doing or were they going to put a hold on everything and take control. Well, they consented. And from that moment on, our government has been functioning under emergency powers. And you can go back and do your own studies. Who enacted emergency powers? We're under emergency powers right now. The decisions made in the last couple of weeks were made when Congress was not present, and it does not matter. People say, oh, why wasn't Congress? Well, because Congress's position under emergency power is reactive, not proactive. And so where does our civic duty kick in? Well, our civic duty kicks in because our constitutional rights, but not even our human rights, the ability to survive as a community, as a people, in humanity, we need to be able to prevent this level of control, this level of fear-based compliance, this level of eroding of sovereignty. The word sovereign has kind of been confused lately, purposely, to define people who are rebellious. But sovereignty is not that. We should all have a capacity to be sovereign, in that we have our own capacity to think, to behave, and to act. Okay? Sovereignty is the ultimate authority to govern oneself without external control. Govern oneself as a person, as an individual, govern oneself as a people, coming together, creating this governance. Sovereignty equals decision-making power. It means that there is no higher authority above the sovereign within a given domain. That's why the rights of sovereign nations are under attack right now. You have sovereignty if you have the authority to govern yourself. And it doesn't even have to start externally, as in our local community, although that is part of it, but it starts internally. Because if the conditioning begins in our mind, then we have the ability to lose sovereignty and agency before we even have the ability to speak or to act. You have control over your mind, your thinking, your actions. Because if you don't have that, you definitely can't hold somebody else accountable. So when it comes down to civic duty, when it comes down to understanding what is truly happening, it's not a matter of letting external influences affect your emotions, trigger fear, pressure, anxiety, ideology, whichever of these come in to play. We have to have the control of our mind first. And it's not difficult. It requires critical thinking. It requires to separate emotions from facts. It's the ability to look at facts without feeling emotions. It's the ability to logically think through this. If our Constitution, if the United States, or if, okay, Constitution started in 1776, Revolutionary War in 1861. Our grandparents were already born in 1912, 1914, 1930s. My grandmother was already born for World War One and Two. Our history doesn't go that far back in America. So this idea of this large time lapse where there is no control is unreasonable because our timeline is not that far. The other perspective is that there's a lot of nuances we need to be able to keep in mind. We need to be able to hold truths without having an opinion because there are emotions in play. Because we think of 1776 and it becoming a country, a sovereign nation, when in reality it was overlapping and had taken over land that was already sovereign in itself. Okay? It is the truth. We're not hiding it. A part of the civil duty that we have is to look at facts consciously and truthfully and to understand how we got to where we got. Our history is not a storytelling novel. It's a history of nuances, pressures, failures. I would love to constantly refer to the Constitution as our constitutional rights, but in reality, they're not just given. They had to create constitutional rights because otherwise somebody else would come and take them. But the risk was always there that somebody would come and overpower and centralize the control, centralize the power, centralize the money. What happens when everything is centralized is that local people lose control. And honestly, when I first started voting, I figured, well, what's the point? That's how disconnected I was from civil duty. What's the point? We don't even vote based on the majority. It's the electorate votes. And I don't know anything about the electorate votes and who influences the electoral votes. So, in that alone, the majority vote is just there for what? Do we know? Do we truly know what that means? Maybe I'm asking more questions than giving answers, and that's a fact. Because I'm not here to give absolute answers. I'm here to create nuances. I'm here to allow for many things to be true and many things to be held in truth without having to have an emotional, absolute, or concrete answer because that is not how life works. And when fear, pressure, anxiety kicks in, conditioning kicks in, the easiest thing for us to do is collapse our wording, collapse our emotions, collapse our ability to think. Okay. Somebody disagreeing with me shouldn't be a problem. Somebody who disagrees without being able to say, yes, I've actually read, studied, critically thought through this, thought of every aspect of it, recognize the truth in every aspect of it. Therefore, I can understand where you're coming from, but my conclusion comes from A, B, and C. That's a conversation. That's a debate I would love to have. But many of us fall under emotional triggers. We can't even act under civil duties and responsibilities and understanding because we're so caught up in the mind first. We can't even get out of the mind. We definitely can't express. Everything collapses into big words. English is a language. I speak three languages. Um, I wish I spoke more. But English, particularly, is a language that collapses its words. It's a powerful language for triggers, little explanation, emotional context. Okay. Other languages require you to create context before you say something. The English language, you can make bold statements with no need to back it up. And it becomes a weapon, and it has become a weapon. So, why do I say this? Because we can't even go in and do our civil duty unless we have a consciousness and the critical thinking necessary to not spew fear, ideology, short words, absolutes. We can't do it. Because in doing so, you would lack the ability to look at the nuances, to see everything from every perspective, to break down analytically what is happening. Okay. If you go to your local county, your local offices, how are you going to uphold your civil duty? Is it going to be an emotional trigger reaction to something they've done that you're mad? Or is it because you've studied every aspect of it? You've interviewed people, you've studied it, you've participated, you've volunteered in it, you've recognized it. And now you understand enough to be able to question, is this right? Are our books open? Is anyone looking at our books? Do we vote for judges and not know if they actually vote in our favor? And I say vote. A lot of our legal system is imbalanced. An imbalanced legal system can't function. And that's because the priorities are messed up. But do we know what is causing that? Do we hold people accountable? Why are we still accepting election advertisements when all they do is spew hate of the other person and none of them are intelligibly telling us what they're doing to better our communities and we're okay with it? Where does the civic duty stand? How many people are showing up to town halls? How many people are opening public records? Everything is public, everything is available. But how many of us, unemotionally, will tackle the information and recognize where in all of this do I have a civil duty to act, to defend, to ensure that my rights are protected? Nobody's out there just protecting your rights for the sake of it. That's not what is happening. We can talk about the Constitution all we want, but again, the Constitution under pressure failed, and they worked around the Constitution. So what makes us think that today we can just sit here and work and hope that everything else happening around us is just going to function to our benefit? Schools don't teach civic duty. Well, I didn't even know what civic duty was. Do you? Civic duty is the responsibility of individuals to actively preserve the integrity, freedom, and functioning of their society through informed participation and restraint. Civic duty is the obligation to engage in public life in ways that protect liberty, uphold accountability, and prevent the concentration or abuse of power. Okay. Essential components of civic duty is informed awareness, understanding how power operates, law, institutions, incentives, economy, distinguishing facts versus narratives, authority versus legitimacy, law versus enforcement. Ignorance is not neutral, it transfers powers to others. Meaning, if you stay ignorant, you're transferring your power to somebody else. We as a community often, I don't talk to people my age about our civic duties. It's not a positive thing, it's just a reality. It requires reasoned judgment, thinking before reacting, resisting fear based and outrage driven manipulation. It's what's constantly happening with politics, with decisions. We get thrown at things and we react emotionally. We feel like we're forced to make a decision immediately, but no, that's not the responsibility. Holding multiple truths without collapsing into extremes. You cannot hold to one truth and fight everybody else. That's ideology, that is an inability to function accurate. It's not sustainable to believe that there is only one truth. There are too many nuances to truth. And if you want to know more about that, I have a previous video discussing truth. Because we often get wrapped up in I'm right, and something being true are two different things. I'm right is an emotion, is ego driven. The truth is simply stands. It stands whether you like it or not. It stands whether it's repeated or not correctly. It stands because it's truth. A triggered population is easy to govern. We know that, we understand that. A reasoning population is not. So everything I'm saying is because we need to become a reasoning population. For our own good, for our own mental sovereignty, capacity, for our children's future. Participation with restraint. Civic duties include voting where applicable, peaceful dissent, meaning you have the ability to dissent, but what do you do with that dissent? Just gonna put it on social media? That's not dissent. What do you do in actual facts, paper filing, conversations, people, meeting? What does dissent look like? Jury service, community engagement, speaking when necessary, remaining silent when the noise replaces understanding. Another part of our civic responsibility is the defense of rights, protecting due process even for those you disagree with. This falls in every aspect of our society, our civil servants, and us as civilians. We have a duty to protect due process. We talk about constitutional rights, but if you believe that due process should be given to one and not to another, you're not. It's a matter of precedent, it's a matter of standard. If due process is not followed, creates a precedent that eventually will fall on even those you would not want that to happen. Due process is a constitutional right. But how many civil servants know it? They have an oath to the Constitution. They have an oath to the Constitution of their state and to the Constitution of the United States of America to uphold. And yet many of them don't know the rights of due process. Therefore, they step on them. If you don't stand by your rights, if you don't stand for the rights of others, you create precedents for people to walk all over us. Defending speech, even when it's uncomfortable, just because somebody disagrees, does not give a reason to shut speech down. But our debate, let's be honest, our debates need to be more conscious. I mean, people fight all the time simply because they want to be right, because they want to stay within their ideology, because they want to stay within their comfort zone, because they refuse to step out of their own version of life and recognize that there are other truths happening at the same time. The capacity to know that and have empathy and have critical thinking and reasoning that tells you, although I feel this way, I know better than to believe that my feelings govern truth. Upholding limits on government even during crisis. How do we uphold limits on the government even during crisis? Rights are tested precisely when they are unpopular. Accountability of power, questioning authority without nihilism, demanding transparency without hysteria, and refusing to outsource thinking to institutions, media, or leaders. Liberty survives only where power is watched. So, what was civic duty? What is our role? Are we to be filling our time with entertainment, with going out with friends, to just hang out, to play this popularity game and to feed into our own insecurities and the need to keep up with the Jones? Or is our responsibility to use our time to ensure that the community, anything that surrounds us, our civic duty is being upheld? If our local communities are not functioning the way they should be and our federal government isn't functioning the way it should be, we cannot be faulting them. We as civilians have put our rights, our life into their hands. We submitted to their governance with the understanding that they were going to follow the Constitution. That is the contract that binds us to them. Without that, why would you submit? But if you submitted to it, then you need to be accountable. But they say, inspect what you expect. It's not just in business and corporations, it's the same in law and in governance. We do have authority. We do have authority to research, to look into, to demand transparency, to look at the books, but we have to do it. We have the Freedom of Information Act. I was just looking at, watching a YouTube video. The National Archives have all government videos that you might want. The FOIA was one recent in November. There's a new general counsel for the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. The ability for any American citizen to request and demand information on the decisions that are being made, on the laws being passed, on the decisions being made, how they made the decision, how they came to those conclusions. We have the right to see it, not simply taking what social media or what news outlets, the little bits and pieces here and there that we know logically that that is not enough information for us to come to a reasonable, informed decision. The FYA is there so that we as people can request the information from anyone who's governing us. And yet, as they were saying, the FOIA is backlogged with institutions that understand that that level of information is beneficial to them to stay one step ahead. Banks, corporations, manufacturing companies, you name, legal, they're all one step ahead. Not because they're more aggressive, not because they're trying to take something from us, although maybe the way it's working is not great if they're backlogging it. But it's the idea that there are some people who understand access to real information, to real research, to actual facts is necessary in order to make an informed decision. So, civic duty, I simply ask that when you consider civic duty, when you think of our politicians, officers, anyone who's a public servant to the civilians who have sworn an oath to the Constitution, to the people, okay, that before you make an opinion, and make give yourself the time to do the research, to ask the questions. Avoid what is happening now, which is emotional triggers. Ask yourself, is this an emotional trigger? Do I actually logically have enough information to have informed decision and reasoning in this situation? Or do I need to gather more information? And if I need to gather more information, who, what, wow, how, when, and where can I gather this information? Assembly is important. Churches have assembly, but it doesn't stop a neighborhood to come together and understand who in their neighborhood has the resources and the opportunities to come together rather than spending time together on superficial, boring conversations. Maybe we need to start talking about civic duty. Maybe we need to start talking about what we can do to truly be informed rather than be moved by emotions, opinions, ideologies, biases, and a lack of information. You can argue day in, day out, but if you're not arguing informed, if you do not know what you are talking about, you're just wasting breath. Okay. How many people say they're Republicans and Democrats and don't even know the definition of Republican and don't know the definition of Democrat? How many people stand behind a word rather than stand behind the true history and meaning behind what we say and why we say it? And then we have to ask, how important is it that we identify with one or the other? How, on a scale of importance, is that the most important factor? Or am I looking at my civic duties and I'm holding people accountable to those duties, regardless of who they are, who they identify, what governance and form of governance we're choosing? Because a governance only works when the people hold government accountable. It doesn't matter if it's a democracy all the way down to the extremes of socialism, communism, every single one of them. If you look at the ideology behind it, the idea, the dream that they had made sense. That's why everyone can argue their opinion. Because if you look at them, they made sense in an ideal world, in the ideal world where the people who are governed hold those who govern them accountable. And when that balance shifts to power over people, it doesn't matter if it's considered a democracy, communism, socialism. Once that scale trips, we have a problem. So don't get stuck in opinions. They don't do anything for you. Opinions and emotions and ego, that feeling that starts every time. We don't want to hear what somebody else has to say. Pause it. Just ask them, what's your basis and foundation for what you're saying? What did you read? Who did you study? How long have you been studying this topic? And then you have to ask yourself the same thing. How long did I study this topic? Am I truly informed? There needs to be a respect for information, for truth, for facts, for reasoning, for analytical thinking. Yeah. So that's where we're at. The grievances of our forefathers with the King of England are not very different from the grievances that we are suffering today. They did something about it. What will we do about it? Will we uphold our civic duty? Will we correct the imbalance? Will we take the responsibility for our actions rather than constantly throwing that responsibility on somebody else? Will we hold people to a better standard? When are we going to stop having our politicians play these games on the TV, bashing each other? Unintelligent, uninformed, ignorance. And we accept it. And then we fight over it. And then we vote for these people. And then we're surprised that they're not doing what's best for the people. We should not be accepting that. These people should be coming to the table every single day. What are you going to do? Have you considered every single aspect? We should be interviewing, interrogating, and finding out whether or not the people who will represent us will do the right thing. So I guess this message is, don't let the situations of today make you feel like you don't have control. You do have control, but you have to take accountability. It starts with you, and it starts with your actions in your community. Before that, it's difficult to even consider being concerned about what the federal government is doing at this time, what our administration is doing at this time, what decisions are being made. The American people are not happy. But then the American people are also allowing all kinds of ignorance being fed to them, and they take it and repeat it like puppets. And they hate on anyone who has critical thinking and reasoning, who refuses to take sides, who likes to have a proper, solid, well rounded, analytical conversation, who likes to dissect the facts, not emotions, who is not trying to feed into anybody's ego. It's easy to give the fault externally, but we need to look internally before we do externally. And we have to do it fast. We have to do it fast because there's a lot more happening. And actually, what is happening today is a very interesting point, and I guess we can look at from an external perspective why we are where we are today. You see, when the people who are governed, okay, in this case, the nations, they have international law, they have rules, they have agreements within countries, they have allyships, okay, they have partnerships in trade. We are all connected in this world, okay? Contracts, commerce, business, whatever that is, military. And there's rules. We call them international rules, agreements, that in order to stay civil, in order to not repeat the past, we abide by these rules and we hold each other accountable. But what happened? Some actors on the world play started breaking the rules. And they set a precedent. Just going to invade a country. Just going to destroy another country. He created precedents. When one country doesn't follow the rules and nobody says anything, it's just an alarm to say, oh, look, they did it. Oh, look, they did it too. If they did it, I can do it. Setting precedents is breaking the rules, and there's no accountability. When somebody broke the rules of engagement, there should have been an accountability, but there wasn't. And when there is a lack of accountability, it gives everybody else the option to do the same thing. On a micro perspective, that's civil duty. If you allow somebody who's governing you, right, to walk over your constitutional rights and you say nothing, then you've just given them a pass. You set the precedent the way that you're going to be treated, and they will do it. And on a worldly scale, we're dealing with the same thing. Well, if they did it, I can do it. It's a dangerous play. The peacekeepers, they were supposed to be peacekeepers. NATO, call them the European countries. They didn't hold accountable the actors they needed to hold accountable. And in not doing that, and in others not doing that, not speaking, everyone spoke, everyone disagreed on social media. We've all seen the disagreements. Okay. But that's the difference between talking and actually enforcing boundaries. Those boundaries were not enforced for whatever reason, political, geopolitical, economic, trade, financial issues. Everyone chose to stay quiet in terms of actions. So here we are with our own country now establishing they can do as they please. Okay. We have a civil duty because what is happening on an international scale will affect us all. I'm not condemning, I'm not justifying, I'm simply stating that once a precedent is made, what stops other people from continuing? When a whole people could not be saved from destruction and murdered for us all to see, yet nobody did anything to stop it. Tell me, what precedent have we established? It's been done before. We thought we had created rules to stop us from doing this again. But the moment somebody breaks that power shift, breaks the rules, and is not put back into their place, we create a precedent for others to do the same. So here we are, destabilizing the apparent peace. It wasn't actually peaceful then, but it was less hidden than it is today, more obvious, more audacious. Sometimes I wonder if there's any critical thinking and thought of consequences or reality in the decisions being made. But again, I can only hold myself accountable to what I have been doing right here and now in my community and today, and I have not done enough. So rather than get caught up in fear, anger, justification, and fight on social medias or with our people, we need to start having conversations. And the topics we need to be touching are law. The law is not for everybody else except for you. The law is something that was handed to each of us, and we have the duty to learn the law for our own protection and to uphold it. How can we uphold the law if we don't actually know the law? Economics, we need to know what's governing the money and what is happening with the money flow. We need to, because we're being taxed. We're working all day, every day. We're being taxed consistently. What is happening with the money, and why are we not concerned about it to the point that we actually take reasonable action, not by fighting, not by arguing. Again, this is thoughtful, critical thinking where we come together as communities and societies and we start to build the ability to think through and reason this. Okay. I'm not encouraging anybody to just go out there and do some crazy, I don't know what. I'm saying we need critical thinking. I'm saying we need to come together and we need to have these discussions and we need to test it locally before we can push anything on a higher governmental level. We have to do it for our own survival. The idea that somebody else is magically going to protect us is inherently wrong. Nobody is concerned about protecting your life, your agency, your rights, your sovereignty. That is your responsibility as a human being, as an individual, and a member of society. So I hope this is not a doomsday conversation. um, I hope it's a conversation that we can spark. Please comment, talk to me, disagree with me. I don't know. Give me other talking thoughts around what I'm saying. I know a lot of people don't watch my videos. My conversations are not popular. And I might be a very boring speaker. Either way, um, I want to have real conversations. So I challenge anyone who has real thoughts or real conversations, who has studied or who is willing to study, to analyze, to think critically, who want to have these discussions, who want to start engaging other people to figure out, well, what can we do on our side so that we do not get lost in panic and helplessness, because those are the worst conditions for us to fall into. And I would hate for us to do that. Okay. And we need to do better for our children. It's a must. I know we've been sold entertainment and fun and life full of wealth and chasing wealth and fancy homes and fancy cars, but that is not the basic foundation of our responsibility in this life. The governance is either you govern yourself or somebody else is governing you. Consent is either you're consenting or you're being forced to consent, or you don't consent at all and your rights are being trampled. Thought. Are you thinking critically for yourself, or is every thought that you have decided based on triggers, emotions, or captions from the external world? Anything external from your own reasonable, critical thinking skills. And stop fearing what other people say, but think through what you're going to say. Words matter. Definitions of words matter. The way words are put in context, the tone that we use, and whether or not we speak emotionally or factually changes the way that we can interact with other people and the results that we get. So that's the end of my conversation. I hope you do interact with me. I hope somebody gets through the end of this video. But let me know. Let me know.